Coming up, a crossover conversation we promised was coming ahead of the Thursday night preseason debut for both the Lions and the Giants. It's Antony from the Roar of the Lions UK podcast. We'll break down matchups of the depth chart variety when it comes to preseason and also try to kick around some potential cut candidates and even trade targets that could have these two teams talking well into the regular season. We dive in coming up next. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant podcast, where you know I am one of your hosts, Aman-Ra, joined today by Antony, as I mentioned at the top, from the Roar of the Lions UK podcast, breaking down what will be, of course, Antony, as we welcome you into the show, a seismic preseason of the utmost important matchup on Thursday night between these two teams.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just great to have football back, though. No, oh, yeah, I know the preseason doesn't take as much precedence as the regular season does, but I've been bored during the summer. So much waiting for this. It's very different from Lions years gone past. Like most times, we've been bad, and the offseason we can kind of wait for the season to come again. We're not too fussed, but now we're in a window. We're ready to go. We just want the thing to get here. So it's great that preseason's here, and it is actually very important for us this year, as we'll talk about later. But yeah, I'm just glad it's back. It's nice.
And it really was, man. Like this past week for probably both teams and both fan bases, it's the first time when, you go through veterans, OTAs, rookie mini camp, all those things it's all fine and well, but it's mostly t-shirts. You finally get a little bit of pads, but then you're also not getting the same level of competition. And as we saw in these joint practices, maybe the same level of anger and rage coming out on both sides. You mentioned it's a different type of season for the Lions. How did you associate these two joint practices? Because on the Giants side, we're thinking, hey, this team, there's not a lot of expectations. We've got some young players, some new players. Like, hey, the chippiness is nice for us, a little bit of attitude. But the Lions, obviously under Dan Campbell, have been a team with that type of attitude in them already. Do you put stock in what you get out of these joint practices the way maybe a lesser team in the Giants would?
Oh, absolutely. And I do really like the Giants as a matchup for us, especially when it comes down to the trenches. Like, you guys have an incredibly good defensive line, and our offensive line is great. But when it's tested against some of the best that you're going to come up against in the season, that's why we've got one of the best offensive lines in the league, because it's of that battle. And you look at Campbell and Daboll, they are both very similar guys. They like to get physical. They're not worried to go in there and, get that grit, really just let the players go hell for leather, because that's what you've got to do. Dan likes to prepare his players for a season. There's no point getting to these games and your body's not prepared for it. Your body has already got to have gone through 100 hits. It's already got to have gone through a lot of pressure so that it can withstand the season coming. So, I really like it. Like last year was really good when we played together, because I thought we matched up incredibly well, and I thought we both benefited a lot from it. And then obviously I think that's why they did it again this year. As you say,
will there be a third time? Well, we'll see. Will they get together a year from now?
Exactly, round 3, as they say. But no, I do like it, and I put a lot of stock in these joint practices. We never really used to do them, but it's been a thing under Campbell that we've done more. We've done it with the Jags. We've got 2 lots this year, actually. So yeah, I very much put stock in these.
Did you do you think, because this is just a little bit of a sidebar about what you want to see from the NFL overall? We still talk about primetime preseason games, and now it's been the idea of, well, show us the joint practices. Like, this is what should be televised, because this really is where you're seeing the real reps, and from the number ones primarily. Hey, Malik Neighbors going out there, Kayvon Thibodeau for us, right? Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, like seeing those snaps and then how they match up on your side of things. That actually, I think, is more entertaining or interesting for fan bases to see, as opposed to still value, and we're going to talk about it, but you're going to get mostly, we already know starters aren't going to play in preseason 1. They may not play in 2. They may not play in 3. Like, we don't know where that snap count's going to be. So it just feels like you're examining rosters differently when it comes to the actual preseason games versus these practices.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really changed for us over the course of Campbell's tenure here. So obviously when he came here, we had one of the worst rosters in the NFL, probably the worst. I would not admit that we were. So when you came to preseason, a lot of the guys played because they had to. Really, it was a case of didn't really have much depth knocking round, and you need to get these guys ready. And even to the point up to last year, the guys were playing preseason. They played a few. I think the first game they played, they went down the field in about 6-7 plays, scored, off they came. They still needed, but now, like I say, we're in a position where as a Super Bowl chasing team, we don't need to do it now, but the more critical thing for us now, and why it's more critical for us this year than it ever has been, is it's sorting out your depth. You're right. I think you do need to give more exposure to this. Yeah, you already know about all the main players on your team, but you want to see the potential stars, the UDFAs making a push. These guys who depth wins you Super Bowls. It's one of the most critical parts of your team. It's not necessarily about the starting 22. It's about the 30 guys that come after them and their ability to step in and take the load off. So I still think there does need to be more emphasis put on it. And I still think it is very valuable for teams, especially for us this year. We have a lot of depth, not concerns, a lot of depth battles which need to be resolved, which will make or break our Super Bowl year.
Yeah, it feels more like Lions, and that's why part of what we're excited about is who are you going to cut? Who's not going to make this roster that the Giants can be laying in the weeds on? Because it's two different. Yeah, hey, depth matters for the Giants too, but it's mostly around question marks. Whereas for the Detroit Lions, you're looking at it and saying, hey, we're going to have to make tough decisions at key positions, but we want to make sure the depth that we keep is of the highest value, whether that's getting snap counts on Sundays, whether it's about injury concerns around certain starters, etc. Before we get into that, though, was there anything from the joint practices at the starter level that you either said, hey, we really looked good here against quality like Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns at these key matchups, or spots where you said, oh, like the Giants got the better of us here and we need to make sure we're shoring that up ahead of the regular season?
So I was quite happy with the performance of our offensive line in a lot of places because, again, like I said, you have a killer defensive line, and that's why I love playing against you, especially now Brian Burns is in town as well. But, they're only going to stay the best by competing against the best, and I thought they did very well. Yeah, there's always going to be reps where one comes off bad. Like, this is the thing. It's a bit of a back and forward cycle, but overall, I like they had a bad rep, they rebounded, but overall, they look really good. Areas for concern, I wouldn't call it a concern because I have a different view on this than a lot of other Lions fans. Our secondary, coming up against the likes of Malik Neighbors, and I again like your wide receivers. They're a good bunch. They're a tricky bunch. They're hard to deal with. And for us, obviously, we've got two rookies coming in this year, Ennis Rakestraw, Terry and Arnold. They're fresh, they're new, they're learning. We've brought in two veteran corners, Amit Robertson, Carlton Davis, and then the safety group is relatively young. All guys still on the rookie contracts branch, etc. It's a young, inexperienced group that has not worked together a lot. So I was expecting to see gelling issues with them, communication issues. So live reps is the only way to solve that. Like a lot of Lions fans think we'll be great right away in the secondary. I don't think we will. I think we've got great players who will be really good going forward. I think Terry and Arnold's with a shot of defensive rookie of the year type category, but it's going to be a little bit of a slow burn process. So seeing some of them did get burned on some plays and that, but it's not concerning me. It's just how it happens. They learn, they get better. And in Terry and Arnold's case, every time this week you've seen him have a play that was bad, the next play goes out and he rectifies it. He learns on the job. He learns his mistakes. So, it's just been very good all around for us. The running backs have been looking really good. The receivers for us, our depth ones have been looking quite good. Again, that's why I like the matchup when we're not fighting all the time. It's just really good competition between two good groups in the position areas we really need it.
And it's so funny too, because you talk about, good rep versus bad rep. And I think that's maybe the flip side of when you see these joint practices is from a coaching perspective, you're not sitting there going, okay, that's one bad, two, third, that's it. We're going to pull you off the field. It is about the growth of these players. And we saw it even whether it was Andrew Thomas, gets beat on a rep. And this is even when they're going back to just, half pads or t-shirts and shorts within the own Giants team, offense versus defense. And you go, oh boy, he really got beat on those two reps. Yeah, of course. You don't know what you're trying to work on, a new depth stance. You're trying to figure out how I want to position myself, run versus pass blocking, what moves I want to work on. We saw some good ones from Thibodeau going up against Sewell and saying, hey, he's working on a new stutter rep where he's breaking himself down, faking inside. And then, it looks like he gets incredibly clean around Sewell. I don't know what he's working on the flip side of that rep and whether or not he's more concerned about not getting beaten inside. I'm focusing on technique, interior. So you're not going to look at those, and that's the highest level with a starter, and say, oh, is he getting exposed? And that's even on our end going, let's hype up Kayvon Thibodeau. Look how much he's winning these battles. There's a lot more going on, I think, than we see on a, rep to rep or at a glance and catching some of these clips in there. You go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was about to say exactly, and that's why you would like to see more of it sort of broadcast, so you can have a little bit look at how they're doing. Because I am very much a technique guy as well. Like when I do scouting in college, I love technique over anything else. And as you say, like doing the intra squad stuff, that's been really good for us this year. You can tell the caliber of our team when Brad Holmes first came here, and we had the offensive line for the most part were good. Offense was beating up on the defense all the time. So the defense was terrible, and no matter where you went in camp, all that, it's just the offense. Then over time, it's gotten a little better, and to this point this year, it's like a tennis match. Like offense has a really good day, defense goes away, thinks about it, comes back, stymies the offense goes away, and that's what you want. Just hitting it back and forward between. That shows you've got a very healthy team. Two healthy sides of the ball challenging one another. And then, of course, we get to come to you guys, especially where we're in the trenches, and we get to sort of work on that. And, the one I want to mention quickly is Aleem McNeil. I don't know if you saw him, but he's been ragdolling whoever you've been playing at center all week because he goes up against Frank Ragnow in training every single day. And Frank Ragnow is the best center in the NFL. And he's talked about Aleem's development over the years, and he's in a contract year. We're going to pay him a lot of money, but like he was pushing the guy back 5-6 yards per jump, and you're like, my God. That is the build from. That's how our two teams have been fighting each other, offense and defense, in our camp, and it's showing against you guys now. It's great, but this is where everything has value.
And this is the classic because, we want to say, well, that's Van Roten who's been filling in at center because our second-year guy, John Michael Schmitz, is injured. But it also exposes that idea from a Giants side. You go, great. Our starter's not there. By the way, he had a rough rookie season, came out as the best graded center out of the draft class, and yet struggled at times and had injuries. Fine, he's not playing, but who's plugging in there at center? And if all of a sudden it's going to be a 34-year-old veteran Van Roten who just came in, just got signed, but he was absolutely abused. And it doesn't matter which way you slice it. It's still just you look down at that and you go, okay, that's a problem. Let's go ahead and circle and underline that. Exactly. And the Giants have obviously struggled with that depth piece, which when we talk about getting into this game on Thursday night and maybe looking more at depth and where some of these interesting battles on both sides of the football, but what are teams confirming? So I'm curious about when you look at the Lions offensive line specifically. Let's start offensively, and then we'll get into defense, because obviously from a Giants perspective, at least our starters in that defensive trench we feel good about. When you look across your offensive line, it's primarily set and forget for your starting five, and then you get into your depth pieces and where you feel most confident. If you say, I need to put the board together in terms of the backups, where is your cutoff in terms of how many you think they'll carry? And who are the locks to be in place as far as depth goes for the offensive front?
See, this is where I'm a little bit of a pariah in Lions land at the moment, because everyone loves our offense. I love our offensive line. It's great, but our depth is really concerning right now, because obviously, like I say, we've got the starting five, but there's not much NFL experience bedded in behind it. Guys who've played, like we've got Coyote Awashika, our guard. He's played about 20 games for us in various parts over the years, which is great. But then we brought in Muti from Seattle. We just lost him for the season. One of the only guys we've got in veterans in there. And then when you look across the rest of the line, like at left tackle, you will be repping Obinareze or Connor Galvin there. They are two guys we picked up undrafted out of recent drafts who've not really played that much for us. When you're looking at center, we've been repping Michael Neese there, who's undrafted as well. You're looking at the tackle positions. We bought Manu, the big Canadian dude, in this year in the draft. And when I tell you he is at least 2 years away from seeing the field in any sort of capacity,
wow,
I'm not joking.
Right.
He's huge, but like his technique is terrible at this moment in time.
We by the way, all fall prey to you see that massive body and go, oh, baby, he'll just move people around.
I hated it.
Technique, footwork, it always happens, right?
Yeah, I hated the draft pick. I did. I think he'll be good in time, but I hated it when we made it. Then we've got Colby Sorsdal. We drafted from William and Mary last year in the 5th round, but he's an FCS guy. He's got a lot of developing to do as well. And that's kind of our line behind our starting five at this moment in time. There's not much in terms of NFL experience depth there. And, we've lost Christian Mahogany, who was one of our draft picks. Loved it. He's dropped so far in the draft, which I thought we got a steal. He'd be a starter. He's off with some form of illness, which has knocked him out the entire preseason. He is not going to play in the games. He is not there. So he's likely going to start in the practice squad for us. So,
yeah, when it comes to rookies, no matter what your expectations coming in are, if you miss those camp reps, it just pushes you. It has to push you back in terms of timeline.
Yeah, and Dan won't fast track you back in. He just doesn't do that. He will put you down until you are ready to go. So I've been quite concerned about it because if a guy goes down, like I've got faith in our coaches to develop these guys, but there's not much NFL ready depth there. Which is the problem for us at the moment, which is why this is going to be big for preseason, because I want to see the starting five they put out, who they're putting where, how they're looking, because we need to see development from them this year.
So then if I bring up Dan Skipper and I say a player who has been around, obviously in the league, has he's played in a career 79 games. Career 40 games, 37 games with Detroit, 3 with Houston. I was doing the math, adding them all together with career numbers there. So he has something in terms of experience. But do you look at him as being, because you mentioned all this depth and experience or lack thereof, but you didn't bring him up? Is that because you're assuming he's experienced enough to be a part of that group? Because I read a couple of articles at least that suggested just brought in. There's no dead cap number associated with the post-June cut for him. It's only $1 million. Is he just a veteran player for camp, or do you see him being a part of it? Because I look at it when we talk about Josh Ezeudu on the Giants side being put in, at least right now in their official depth chart at right tackle depth, like we have massive swing tackle questions. And I would circle, underline, and go, hey, if they're talking about losing him, a veteran, the Giants should at least be talking about bringing in for a visit.
Yeah, so I love Dan. Like the whole eligibility thing last year, he's one of the nicest, friendliest, 10-foot tall guys in the entire world ever. And I love him. And yes, we will likely take him on the roster. See, where I'm looking at the roster, I'm looking for future guys. Yeah. Dan is not an NFL level tackle in terms of being a starter. Like we've seen, if you need to bring him in for a few reps, usually we bring him in as a sixth lineman or secret wide receiver or something like that. Yeah, he's like our jumbo guy, secret wide receiver. But I'm looking at guys who are going to be the future of this, because obviously, Frank's been battered around to high heaven. He's dealing with so many injuries, but he's carrying on going. Zeitler's 35. He's going to be a 1-year rental for us here.
Former Giant, man. We jettisoned him so he could emerge with a championship level team in Detroit.
Exactly. But Graham Glasgow, he's in his 30s. It's like you want to see the guys rising up from the bottom who are going to give you the established depth for the future. And right now, again, as much as I love Hank, our O-line coach, who's one of the best in the league, he's not developed day 3 guys into guys who are
right
big on this roster at the minute. Yeah, and the guys we're going to be taking this year, the vast majority of them are day 3 or undrafted free agent guys from the past. And we need to see, can he do it to the point where they can come in and play reps? Because it's an older line for us and injuries happen. We got so lucky last year in terms of injuries and that we didn't really get that many. And so we got a couple of guys in. So we need to see growth from these guys, especially Soulstall's the one I'm really, really watching. It's his year 2. He's had a year where he's just been able to sit, learn. Yep. He's played a little bit of NFL football. Is he going to come up to where we want him to be now? Because that'll be huge for us. He'll be that tackle guy. We need a swing as well. You talk about a swing. We've not had a swing since Terrell Cross.
This is the state of rosters when you're like, we need a swing tackle. I'm like, yeah, but we'll take what you don't think is a good enough swing tackle. We're willing to take a look at them because that's the state of ours. And the last quick thing on the offensive line, too, is it sounds like, because when we always talk about comparing, hey, the expectations are low. Now, and really, at the point where the Giants say, okay, Andrew Thomas goes down, or now Ezeudu's been shifted over to right tackle. If one of those players goes down, I just as soon say, put Ezeudu in because he's young. You want to see what you have, and the expectations are low overall for this team. But with the Lions, this is also because going back to, they talk about how college, offensive linemen are just not as developed as they used to be, years ago. Now it really is coming to the NFL and then still a couple of seasons to develop. So it sounds like, hey, if one of those top 5 guys goes down, let's just acknowledge we're in a world of hurt in Detroit in terms of what our pivot move would be. And that's true for a lot of teams, but rather than overemphasize having veteran depth there in Detroit. It's basically saying, hey, this is the lineup. And guess what? If one or two of these guys goes down, it's just going to be what we have to deal with at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And, we do, like I say, we have pieces. We have our Sheikah, who's great. So if one of the guards goes down, we've got a guy who can come in there. If the tackles go, that's where we're putting our young William and Mary tackle out there to go and do business. And can he do it? I mean, he might very well be able to, but we need to see him do that first. I can't just say he's going to be great. That would be disingenuous of me. So, but we always find a way around it. In the past, when we have had a guy go down, usually it's a tackle. When it's Taylor's gone down and we've shifted Pede over, we find a way to compensate. We sort of move away from that part of the line. Don't put too much pressure on. It's a very diverse offense we've got, so we can overcome issues on the line for injuries, at least in game time, etc. So it's just a very precarious at the moment. Like, because we've had lots of areas we needed to go after the secondary this year, so we couldn't give like top day 2 picks to offensive linemen to develop for the future. Like, we've already got those guys in. We are banking on the ones we've taken later on to come and do it, but we needed to sort the secondary out first. And you can't fix every part of a team in a season, can you? There's always going to be one part where you're like, we're just going to have to make do this year and then move on.
And listen, with fourth best odds for the Super Bowl coming into the season, like Detroit is established enough in this moment. But we know, I mean, even last year, you think about this team as we flip over to the defense, it was, hey, we believe what the offense can do. 2 years ago, it was, I don't know, can this defense stop anyone? Last year, it was okay. They've made those strides to become, let's start to become respectable. So if you keep adding a piece over a piece, then you feel like the balance between those two sides of the ball are complementary enough to get you where you want to go. When we flip over there, the one that I want to jump out to, but I'm curious about anyone that you think that is a quality player that is not going to be capable of making this roster just based on depth. But we had looked at, again, another name getting thrown out. He was brought in, came highly regarded in his time, I think, last season from Denver, and that's Ben Niemann, who on the unofficial depth chart right now for Detroit comes in buried on the linebacker spot behind Jack Campbell, obviously, behind Derek Barnes. Where does he stand in the hierarchy of your linebacker room? Does he matter at all to what you want to accomplish? Because I was pleasantly surprised about the amount of reps that he has. You go back 2 years ago, he didn't miss a tackle on over 400 reps in a limited supporting role.
Yeah, for me, he's right down our depth chart at the moment, but that's because of the way our thing's built out. So obviously, we have Anzalone. He's our lead guy in there currently. And then we've invested in a lot of youth behind that. So we've got Derek Barnes coming into year 4 now, but he's still on his rookie deal. But 3 difficult years to start with. Linebacker's a hard position to adapt to in the NFL. He really shone towards the end of last year. Coming into a contract year again, you want to give him the reps in there. We've got Jack Campbell coming into year 2. He's going to be Anzalone's long-term replacement as our leader down the line eventually. But again, tough first year for him, but no. How many linebackers go out there and become all pros in the rookie years? They don't, because it's just such a difficult position for him to have. So you've got your 3 guys there, and then behind them, you've got your really trustworthy guys. So Malcolm Rodriguez, I love Emrod to death.
He was such a fun. He was such a fun watch. He was the one that got spotlighted on Hard Knocks for the Lions. I remember because I enjoyed watching that. We watched it with the pre-off season for the Giants this year, which was pseudo interesting. But I tell you, if there's one thing that I go full, fan mode on, it's watching like the fringe guys that you don't have high expectations for slowly build up over the course of a camp. And he was that guy for Detroit. It's a fantastic story.
Yeah, and I'm naturally a small school guy who likes the underdog, so he just fits right in there. But he had to go in his rookie season and start as a 5th round linebacker. Yeah. And he did really well given the circumstances. Now, he didn't play much last year, but he's a special teams ace. And then when we needed him, he came in against Tampa in the playoffs on a drive, and he made stops on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. Like, it was him who did it all. He's great. So he works his ass off. He's in that team there. And then we got Jalen Reeves-Maybin as well, who's our do-it-all. Like, he's been a real big surprise since we brought him back. He was just a special teams guy before he left. He came back. He is one of our better coverage linebackers in there. So we've got 4 or 5 guys who are firmly established on the roster, very much liked by the coaching staff. That is a tough room to break now, because we're not just taking special teams guys anymore, or even the guys right at the bottom of the chart. have big use in our first team. So for a guy like Niemann, it's not that he's bad. It's that he's come into a room which is really good. And no one will talk about Detroit linebackers as being good because there's no household name in there. We don't have, like the league's premier linebackers amongst our ranks. But what we have are incredibly good scheme fits who are really good at their job. And again, they're all rookies, bar Anzalone. So, of course, they're going to be going through a bit of a learning curve there. So I think there's a chance Niemann is done and you might be able to have a go at him. But if for some reason, whatever Rod Malcolm was cut, I don't think he would be. But some people have been chatting about it. You want to be on the phone to him right away, but I love him and I hope he's going nowhere.
And it's funny too, because even over the course of it, like we've looked at our linebacker room, and the reason why we end up like looking at it is because you go, okay, Bobby Okereke, obviously a stud. You make that play for him, and you understand all the reasons why. Micah McFadden came on last year for us, more of a later round pick who has shown that value. But in behind him, you're talking about whether or not is it going to be players like Carter Coughlin, who's an incredibly late round guy and basically turned into a special teamer, Darian Beavers, who can't find a role or can't be healthy enough. When you hear names like Deontay Johnson start to flash a little bit in camp, it's interesting, but it's also always all relative. Like when you're in week 1, joint practices, heading into preseason game 1, talk to me 2 weeks from now. All of a sudden, the reps pile up, and some of the players that you didn't think were going to crack the roster, you get the sample size that tells you, hey, they're not going to be here. So I love the fact that if the Giants are looking depth, there's certainly a couple of names at least to keep an eye on. Before I get into the trades that I'm curious about for the Lions, because you guys want to win a championship, so we got some quality players for you. Quickly, just on, you ended up drafting Rakestraw when it came to the NFL draft this year, and the Giants. You watch it, the board falls a little bit funky for them. There's the run on all of the cornerbacks at the top of the second round. DeJean, McKinstry, Lassiter, which Andy, my co-host, was a big fan of, even Max Melton at a local New Jersey product out of Rutgers. Like, all these guys come off the board, and the Giants end up feeling like, hey, we get a really quality player, best safety on the board in Tyler Nubin, but you're not too far away from looking at a player like Rakestraw. Have you seen anything from him in the very limited that we're talking about, where it feels like this is a quality piece that you're excited to develop?
So one, I adore Tyler Nubin. Great player for you. I'm looking forward to seeing him so much there. So like he was one I wanted.
Isn't it hard to like pivot to when you go from like we're expecting, hey, let's target this position. When they don't get that and they go to another, it's not that it's not a great player, because we are the ball hawk and the athleticism. We think he's going to claim that role eventually, but you have to recalibrate about, now I wanted this, and this is still a good pick, still a good player, but it's hard to change your mind away from that other thing.
Yeah, so I do college scouting for ours. I have a college show. I love college football and I love prospects, and I get deeply infatuated with prospects. I can't lie. So it is difficult for me when they pick guys who are not my. Obviously, like Brad Holmes has proven to be one of the best drafters in the NFL. Like he could pick the guy who is ranked bottom of my board, ranked 2000th in the nation at pick 1, and I will trust him. But me, I just get very upset. Well, like Christian Haynes was the guy this year, the guard out. I was like begging and begging and begging. He went to Seattle, who keep nicking the players that I like, and then it is difficult to separate it. But for Rakestraw, and again, I keep saying this is difficult for me, but during the pre-draft process, I was massively high on Chris Abrams' train, his running buddy from Missouri, who I said multiple times on air in front of loads of people, he's better than Rakestraw. And he went at pick 155 to Denver, and Rakestraw went in round 2. So I can't then come on the shows and say, oh, he's amazing, he's going to be great, he's going to be, I think I saw issues there with him, which is going to take time to develop. But having said that, especially in camp against you guys, like he has really shown out. Like they've been playing him at the nickel, because obviously Mosley got hurt, which is just such a shame for him. 3 massive injuries in a row, but he's sort of moved into the nickel. He's got a few more starting reps, and like he's been making interceptions all week. To the back end, like the last 2 or 3 days of camp last week to in game with you guys, he has just been on a tear. Like forced fumbles, pass breakups, interceptions. He has just hit such a rich vein of form because they've given him an opportunity to do so. And it's really sort of changed my eval, because I thought Arnold will start day 1. He'll be a defensive rookie of the year candidate. Rakestraw will get rotational reps in there.
Mm.
So we've got guys like Amit Robertson, who's going to play in the nickel. We've got guys like Brian Branch, who is certainly going to play in the nickel because I think he could be one of the best nickel corners in the league. Rakestraw we'll see sometime, but he's forcing his way into that conversation now because they do want to move Brian Branch to safety so that he can sort of survey the field a bit more, maybe use the best of his skill set because he's just such a high IQ guy. He'll sit there, see the play, make his move. He's so damn good. So Rakestraw certainly, I think, is going to see maybe a lot more than I anticipated early on. But that's sort of the mantra with all the guys he brings in. Like, this is why I love his draft pick so much. They have a mindset. They don't care where they are on a supposed depth chart. They don't care where they're at in their thing. They know, because Dan and Brad have set the culture, that if we give you an opportunity and you take advantage of it, they will reward you for it. They'll not just send you back down or anything. It's yours to keep. So all these guys, no matter where they come from, what round, you get filled with this vigor, and it just seems to inspire them to get even better.
It's an impressive tactic to take too, because I think, the Giants and Brian Dable has preached that as well. Hey, if you show it Monday through Saturday, you get rewarded by reps on Sunday. And that's easier when you are a team rebuilding, when you're a team trying to find its identity, and when you're bringing in a lot of talent that typically it's about even. So you're really talking about pecking order and earning that. But to be a team with the expectations Detroit has and still be willing to, as a coach, say, hey, young guy's showing it, he gets the reps. That's a hard thing to do when you talk about veterans versus other players there, and making sure everyone still feels like, yeah, we're all going in the same direction here, even if I'm losing out to a guy that just showed up in camp and then stole some of those reps.
Exactly. And like one of the biggest examples of all for us, especially in this camp, has been at our receiver position, because everyone moans about our receivers and that, and not been. I don't have those concerns, but we've got guys like Traquan Smith, Donovan Peoples-Jones, who have done it in the NFL. They've been out there, done it, they got the t-shirt, and you're expecting them to walk into our lineup. And Traquan Smith's on a milk carton. We don't even know if he exists. he's just been nowhere. We've literally no beat writer spoken about him, nothing. DPJ has done some good stuff, but there's been a lot of concern about him as well. And then you're looking at who's repping with the ones. And we've got Darius Fountain repping there, who is just a nobody in terms of, he's not a nobody, but in terms of where he was on the roster and everyone trying to predict the 53, he wasn't even on a radar anywhere. He's up there now. Caden Davis has been up there doing that. And, Fountain's been impressive since day one in the preseason, since in the offseason, and he's just killed it all year. And Danny's giving him the reps there now, not the NFL guys who've been out there and done it, the completely untested rookie who's not been out there and done it. But that is what inspires them to do so well, because he will do it. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. You go get it. And Darius Fountain might be a wide receiver 3 or 4 going into this season because he's earned that opportunity.
So that's the interesting spot that I wanted to get to here. We'll close out on, we'll take a last look at Thursday night's game and, anything interesting we want to keep an eye on, certainly. But you mentioned it. Green, he has 2 catches over the course of his career. Guy like Kennedy, a handful. When you look through everybody in the depth of that wide receiver room, you mentioned Fountain as well. Like, in the league, yes, but cup of coffee borderline status for most of these guys. If I told you that the New York Football Giants are sitting there and they're looking in their wide receiver room, we now have the elite number 1 in Malik Neighbors. We really like Wan'Dale Robinson. People seem to be, I think marginally undervaluing how good the low yardage, but high reception, high catch percentage, and high versatility he brings to year 2. And then we got Jalen Hyatt, and I think he's ready. So if he takes that leap and claims the starting rep over Darius Slayton, is Darius Slayton, because to me, I look and say, you would love to plug in a guy that is set and forget, 750 yards, give him 50 to 60 receptions, give him a handful of touchdown catches as well. And when you already have, by the way, talk about draft, Aman-Ra St. Brown, I miss a lot when it comes to the draft. But that year that he came out, he ended up getting taken earlier than maybe anticipated. And I would have taken him earlier than that. I watched his tape and just said, this guy is going to be that dude for a team. And he has been for Detroit. But Darius Slayton almost seems like a really nice compliment to add into that room when you talk about having another veteran, obviously, there in Khalif Raymond. But again, more of a journeyman type player. Would there be an appetite from Detroit's side to say, depending on what it takes, obviously, but adding in a little more experience? Or is this, again, we like, hey, the youth, we're seeing it, and we're going to go ahead and reward them going into the season?
I mean, there's always like with every GM, there's always like a risk reward thing, right? There is always a price to be had, and Brad's motto is you've got to at least ask about everything and what it is. The,
Right.
the thing is, with guys like Slayton, like I like Darius Slayton. I think he's a good player. I think he will be good here. The thing is, how we've built our team, it's not really by bringing in guys from the outside. You've got to have a very specific mindset to thrive in this. You know, when he talks about grit, it's not a moniker. It is an actual. It's a mental thing. They draft their players as much on the mental side as they do on the physical side, and even sometimes the ceiling's not as high for a player as it might be as a best player available thing. They will take the guy whose psyche fits in there. And in Detroit over the years, we've brought in so many free agents who just don't care. You know, they've come in, they like, especially during Patricia and the Patriots years when like everybody came in, they just came for a payday. They didn't really give a damn. With them, you have to prove that you can buy into our system, that you're willing to work your way up, and that it's not going to be easy for you. And they've shown a tendency to go for their own guys in the face of turning away what would seem more obvious talent right at the beginning, if you get me.
Yeah.
Like
We trust us. We trust what we know about
exactly.
our guys as opposed to what other people tell us about someone else. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
Exactly. So Darius Slayton might be on the market, say, just as an example, and then people go, "Oh, we should get him. We should get him." But if Antoine Green like really performs during these preseason games, if Doris Fountain really performs during these preseason games, they will go to them because they have been in Detroit. They have put in the hard work for Dan and this team, and they will go out there and they know they'll give everything during the season. And that's kind of how this thing has really worked. At its core, the culture is live or die for this team. And if you try and get away from that, then that's where it could all come undone. So they certainly would look at it. But for me, if one of the guys really performs, they'll wait. And for me, if we're talking about trades and that, which we may do eventually, I'm waiting to the deadline this year. They always give their in-house guys chances first because it's better for the team if they perform well. Because obviously you've already got them. You can pay them a little, pay them a little, whatever. But it's better for us to fix the problems in-house than have to spend trade capital and money down the line right away.
And this is also where you want the hard knocks. We saw Joe Schoen talking like with GMs from other teams. You're thinking about this. You want to trade for that. You'd love to hear a couple of GMs at these joint practices standing on the sideline going, oh, we're keeping an eye on your linebacker there. Oh, we don't mind your wide receiver. Oh, well, what do you think? And see, maybe, as you say, even to the deadline, some of that footprint. And that's actually the last one I'll bring up. We talked about him a lot. Listen, Andy, I think, is going to have egg on his face regarding putting up Azeez Ojulari as a cut candidate for the Giants. He's had injury concerns, obviously. You go get Brian Burns, it kicks him down the depth chart here. But I do believe, depending on how the season's going for the Giants, if this thing is 3 games under 500 going towards the deadline, it only makes sense as a player who's going to be hitting free agency, and I don't see a world where the Giants are bringing him back, to explore potentially moving him. The irony here is, I'm curious if the Lions would have any appetite for it, but when you mention grit and some of these characteristics, that might be some of the flags that get raised around Azeez, whether it's just, hey, it's hard for him to stay healthy, but what's your commitment? What's your desire? What are you really putting in here? Because in theory, I'd say, you might really like to have this player as an extra piece for that defensive side, but what's the cost going to be is always the factor, but also what can you trust it to be? So it sounds almost like Darius Slayton I could put up there, man. Guy shows up, guy plays every day, but Azeez would be a better talent on paper, but probably a harder sell for Detroit.
Yeah, and that's the critical thing with us. You've got to fit the mentality there. And our fans do get a little annoyed sometimes when there's a good guy on the trade market at a position of need for us, and they're all begging and screaming for him. And Brad just won't, obviously pick up the phone, but he won't really put much interest and stock in it. Now, that may change this year. Like I said, I would expect us to be buyers at the deadline for the first time. Well, I've probably been alive. That's probably not even a joke, but
because you're there now, because you're on the doorstep,
so,
right? Like
you talk about Ojulari, like we edge is a concern for us, right? We've got Hutch, who is amazing, who's going to be one of the highest paid edges in the league in a couple of years' time. But opposite him, we've had a real tough time getting a guy opposite him so we can have a consistent dual threat from the pass rush. So we've got 3 guys there right now. So we've got Josh Pascal, We got him out of Kentucky 3 years ago in the draft. He's had such trouble with injuries. Meant to be our big end. Like, it's just been so inconsistent with him. He's not been able to get it together. But we're still hoping he can. He's one we're looking for this year. We've got Marcus Davenport. He's injury prone, but he's shown that he can do it for the Saints. But like, he just rinsed the Vikings for a load of money last year and didn't perform. Need to see what I got for him. And then, of course, we've got James Houston, the wonder sensation out of the 6th round from the end of 2022 when he absolutely destroyed everybody and everything. He broke his ankle last year and we didn't really see him. And, you know, injuries have just messed up our entire edge room. We have 3 guys there potentially who can be it. But we have to make a decision as a team now. How long do we give them before we have to go out and make this change? Because if we do want to go to the Super Bowl, we will need someone opposite him to break out, because we're going to be missing DJ Reader for a little bit. Not long, but a little bit. So we're going to need a lot more in terms of the sack department. So this is what I talk about, them giving their guys in-house chances first. Those 3 will get all the chances in the world to show that, A, they can be healthy, and B, they can contribute to this team. And if we get to the deadline, we're struggling. We're doing well, but we're struggling for sacks. They will go to the market then, because there is, like, our grit, determination thing, all that, it will get us 95% of the way, maybe. Then I think just to take that little step towards the end, you might just have to sacrifice your principles just a tiny bit, just to get that last guy on the market. I mean, as long as you stay true to yourself generally, that's fine, but I am expecting us to make a big move at edge if none of those guys get going by the deadline. And, you know, similar maybe at safety if we want a vet guy there and the young guys are not quite up at that point. So I think it might change a little bit. It'll still be core. They've got to have the attitude, but they might just lax the rules a tiny bit, because this is the window for us now and you can't just afford to let it go by.
And it's funny, too, because as you approach the deadline, it can be because some players aren't performing up to the level that you expect them to, or it can be that, no, we're hitting so well right now that adding one more little piece could just push us over, as you mentioned, that last 5% of, hey, listen, a player that could be starting on a bad team somewhere else and is a depth piece for us on our roster can make a big difference. Let's get out of here, Antony, which I mean, listen, greatly appreciate the time. Obviously, if you're watching this episode on the Giants side and you're just a fan of the NFL, go check out Antony. Go check out, obviously, the Roar of the Lions UK. And then before we get out of here, I'll have you plug the college show, because that's a part that, man, the over excitement of evaluating college prospects coming out all the way down to the 7th round and getting irrationally excited is something I love to do. But if we talk about Thursday night, what is the depth position that you expect to see the Lions put a lot of talented players on the field that Giants fans should look at and say, if we're having success here with some of our depth pieces, that's a good sign? Running backs versus linebacking core. We know maybe a little bit thin at cornerback, but is there an area that Giants fans should be excited if they see these depth players winning those battles?
Ooh, there's a few. I mean, on the offense, the running back room, I mean, I don't know what you like for them in terms of depth, but we have a massive battle going on there at the moment. Obviously, Montgomery and Gibbs are our front 2 going into this, but behind them, we've got Craig Reynolds, him of the famous Tampa block last year when he destroyed. Yeah, like, we love him. He's great. And then we drafted Sione Vaki in the draft this year. We've got Zonovan Knight in. He's NFL experienced, and he's an NC State guy, and I'm an NC State fan, so I have allegiance towards him. He's been good. And even down to Jamar Jefferson. So no one will have heard this name before, probably outside. He was a round 7 pick 4 years ago from Oregon State, and I loved him coming out of college. He was great. He started well for us, got injured, has never been able to get up the charts since. He's been repping with the ones against you guys. Like, that's our running back 5 or 6, potentially on the depth chart at the minute, who is working his ass off, who is getting opportunity there. So if you're looking for a little bit of depth and ingenuity in your running back room, if our guys start going off in this, there will be ones to be had there. The receiver room, again, are you looking for depth receivers? Is there a need there? Or are you sort of sorted? Because with the likes of Fountain coming up with, you know, all these guys in, and Antoine Green, etc., we are going to lose guys there we don't want to lose. And there will be, I'm not saying there'll be wide receiver ones for you, but there will be really good depth pieces going forward. Like, if we lose Antoine Green, I still think he's going to be a great NFL player. He's a great deep threat to bring out the back pocket there. So running back and receiver on offense will be the ones.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring it up because we're talking about, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. And then after that, you're really getting into one of two things, either, Bryce Ford Wheaton, who can't stay healthy enough to make us excited, or players that are maybe on the wrong age side. The Giants have an interesting battle there when it comes to McKenzie and Gunnar Olszewski because special teams value and what that's going to look like. But we're not talking about players that have clear-cut roles going forward in terms of the top four, if you include Darius Slayton in it. And then it's a guy like Isaiah Hodgins who flashed 2 years ago coming off the practice squad from Buffalo. Then in his second season, maybe gets exposed a little bit on being big receiver, target receiver, brings everything down, but doesn't necessarily fit what feels like a shifting mold. So maybe someone like Green, that's an interesting just to bring up. I wonder, we don't know for sure right now how much turnover the Giants might have in their wide receiver back end room, but I think they're open to that sort of thing of, too good on our depth to keep this player. We'll go ahead and shuffle out 5 through 7 if we think we're going to get a guy at 24 years old that has a little bit more of a future here.
Yeah, exactly. And then on your defense, the places you want to look, defensive tackle. We've had a real spanner thrown in the works this summer because Levi Onwuzurike.
Hold on, now you're talking, Antony. We defensive tackle. This gets us excited.
So Levi Onwuzurike, he was our pick 3 years ago out of Washington. Our defensive tackle. He had neck fusion surgery, and he's had such problems with injuries. It looked like he was going to retire. He was done. He's come into camp this year fully healthy. He has obliterated everything he's touched during this offseason. I know he got in a bit of trouble with you guys because he touched Daniel Jones's arm throwing a pass. I mean, I just thought, Daniel should get used to having his passes tipped because he always does, doesn't he? So let's just get him ready.
We made it almost 46 minutes in here before a little bit of shade thrown towards our very suspect $40 million quarterback, but
I tried. But no, Levi has been performing really well, which then sort of creates a bit of a depth situation for us because DJ Reader and Ali McNeil are going to be our starting guys. Broderick Martin, we drafted last year out of Western Kentucky. He's our development project. He's going to stay on the roster. But then we took Neki Wingo this year as well out of LSU. And are we going to take 5? Are we going to take 4? I'm not sure. But in that little battle, if Levi is cut just because they're too concerned about the injuries, he's still well worth having on a roster. And I want to see him succeed. I love him. And the amount of fight he's shown to come back from that injury. But whoever gets cut out of that lot, if Wingo goes, he's first-year rookie, he's insanely talented. There will be value to be had there. And then the other one's corner. Because we've invested in corner so much over the offseason. Even with Mosley going down, we got loads. But I'm thinking more a guy, Steven Gilmore, our corner. He's been on our roster since last year. He has been knocking the door down to get up to the first team. There wasn't room to bring him up to the roster last year because the situation we're in, we kind of needed the more senior guys in there. But he's another who's had an unreal camp for us. And just because of the depth and how much we've got at corner and safety right now, there's a chance he might not make the roster now. With Mosley going down, the door might be open. But if he is cut, he is certainly one you should keep. I would love nothing more than to see him get a go in the NFL, because there's him and there's Maurice Norris, the one who trucked your running back the other day. Do you remember on that screen?
It was a fair hit. I think he gave it as good as he got it on that.
It's that, but yeah, those corner rooms, they're not NFL like experienced guys right now, but I'm telling you now, from seeing them the last 12 months, they're ready to go up and make a name. So if you do need a bit of corner depth, I will be looking at those guys as well. Gilmore is well overdue an opportunity in the NFL, and I hope we can give it him, but if not, somebody should.
I'll tell you right now, they took Cordell Flott, moved him from the inside. They've put him on the outside now. We're already giving Nick McLeod first-team reps in these joint practices. Darnay Holmes is getting listed on the unofficial depth chart on the outside, even though he failed on the inside and is trying to get special teams value. And again, back to the draft, the Giants wanted to get a cornerback, and they couldn't afford to do it. So, some fans look at it and say, well, let's go to the market. Let's trade for a player. Let's get a name, a marquee name guy. One, they got $11 million to work with. You got to carry something to the season with you. There's ways to manage that money, but I'm always of the mindset of, again, look at really good teams around the league. They're really good because their starters are there, and also the depth is starting to get set, if not already set. And that's where these type of players, guys that would be already having gotten their shot for the Giants, have just been buried a little bit because there's too much talent ahead of them. So I love, if you're a Giants fan, obviously, going into this Thursday night game and having 3, 4, 5 positions. Don't look at just how we're performing. Look across the field and start to earmark some of those guys that could be a big hit for us. Listen, I am not going to bother, Antony, suggesting that we give our picks for this preseason matchup. It doesn't work that way. These games are meaningless, but the reps really matter. Obviously, as I've mentioned throughout this, I'll put in the show notes all the places that everyone can find you and find the Roar of the Lions UK podcast. But also the college one. Plug that just for everybody in case they're looking for, you said, in-depth, really quality scouting, looking at some of these players that, hey, if you don't have it this year, you're going to be looking for it next year.
So I started that because obviously we're over here in the UK, and when you get to the end of an NFL season, you just get all this draft stuff thrown at you. These guys, this name, that, there's just hundreds of names getting thrown at you, and it's too big an amount of information to really process them that. And I wanted to make it so that we had an outlet where we could do a show during the season every week. We keep eyes on players. If people want to know about position groups or anything, we bring the names to their attention. And it just helps them so that when it comes into draft season, they're not just listening to all these, hot take guys at the top who don't know what they're on about. They've got good informed opinions about what's coming. They can process it a bit better. And especially with me and Ryan who do it, we love small school, group of 5, FCS. Like he loves, he loves his FCS stuff. But yeah, we do a college football show. We do it on Wednesday. I'm actually recording it in about an hour. So if you come across to our channel, you'll see me in about an hour doing it. But in terms of our podcast itself, Broad Lions UK, we go live on Mondays during the season. When the schedule plays out, previews on Thursday, but we're in demand for prime time now, so they're all over the show. And then we do our game reviews on Mondays. We do our college show on Wednesdays generally. But yeah, we work really hard at what we do. Because I was saying to you before the show, it's very tough talking about an American sport over here in the UK and getting people to take you seriously because there's that many podcasts over there. It's not our natural game. We need to know what we're talking about and we need to gain people's trust for it. So we always go in depth with what we do just to make sure that people enjoy what we have to say and where we get at. So, you can find us on Twitter. I'm on there. I love, I don't know if you've seen, I love just like poking the fire on there and having a friendly jibe, and I think it's great. So you can find us, you can interact on there, and if you want to know anything Lions wise, we will be going through it. So Rural Lions UK is where you can find us.
Absolutely awesome, man. Again, all the links will be in the show notes for it. The tragedy of being a better team and getting in prime time more and being overseas means that the starts of those games are a bit of a mess on your side, potentially with the 5-hour difference. So enjoy. I'm sure you're up at 2 a.m. or 11 p.m., whatever it ends up being, really soaking those in. So
it's 1 a.m. tomorrow. The preseason game, 1 a.m. I am going to be up like a psycho watching that because it is NFL football. Like this is what I love about the NFL towards our own soccer season. Like for 4 months of the year, potentially 5, I am just an absolute fanatic. I stay up every night during the night watching college football, NFL football, Lions football, and then I can have 7 months off to get my life back again and have a rest. And that's what I love about it so much. It's just a part of my year, which is full dedication and then out. But I will be watching at 1 a.m. tomorrow to see what your New York football Giants put up with us. And hopefully it's a nice, clean game where we see lots of good technique, lots of good players getting in there, and hopefully not making it look like a Royal Rumble, but we'll see.
Yeah, no spillover from these joint practices, but how could we not expect to be a little bit something out there on the field? Again, all the links in the show notes, man. Antony, obviously know your stuff incredibly well. Obviously know the Detroit Lions incredibly well. Appreciate it, man. We'll be sure, if it's not just about these two teams, just the NFL in general, to catch up again down the road. Really appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time.
And I really appreciate you having me as well. Obviously, it means a lot to us, especially when people in America come say, hey, will you come and talk ball with us? Like, we are immensely grateful when this happens. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we get to do this again at some point. Maybe in the playoffs.
Oh, come on now. Little early round. Giants, little scrappy team making it, getting bounced by Detroit. We'll sign up for that right now today. So
not the Cowboys out the playoffs for us. We'll love you forever.
Yeah, so. Now we're right. Clear the path for Detroit a little bit along the way. No problem. We'll be happy to do that favor for Detroit. We will, of course, be back again on Friday morning on OGP, breaking down the preseason game, talking about those position battles, and now with a list of guys to keep an eye on the Detroit side as well, as Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay. Demand that people know for the first time, the last time, and the best times. As always, Let's go, Big Blue.